Hi there and welcome to Get Good. It is week 3 of our display painting series on this wonderful Krieg Command Squad figure. This series is all about how you can get into this wonderful hobby of display painting, the things that you may wish to keep in mind, and some of the pitfalls that you may run into. This is going to be the final video in the series as we've finished off the Krieg, but I do have a few things I want to say at the end of the video in terms of how this project will be continuing. So let's get into it. In past weeks, we've used the start of these videos to look at processes that may help you in your painting journey, whether it's a case of project discipline or things that you may wish to keep in mind as you go about painting the Mini. Here, it's a little different. In previous weeks, we had essentially completed the body of the figure. What we have to do now is paint key focal points. So I've highlighted these on screen here. The sword, the gun and the face. These are things that the eye will naturally pick out, so we really have to pay attention a little bit more to what we're painting and ensure that we're bringing them out with the right levels of contrast and interest that we need. And when I was sitting down to look at how I was going to paint these things, I realized something quite quickly, namely that the shapes were a little bit more complicated and I needed a way to test out ideas before I began to put paint on the miniature. This then for me is where digital paintovers come in really handy. Here I can play around with colours, light placement, see what I think will work, what will look good on the miniature without having to expand endless hours with paints, blending, repainting, etc. Now, I want to say here that there is a caution that I would put against digital paintovers in that you can do things that you simply cannot with paint. You have infinite capabilities to zoom, you can blend stuff with a blur tool that you can do near enough instantly. It can give you a false sense of what you may be able to accomplish with a brush. But if you can bear that in mind, if you can understand those as pitfalls, then it's a really valuable tool for trying out ideas in a low stakes, low time investment environment. And so with these aspects of the miniature, certainly the sword hilt, which is something I was really worried about, I really began to play around with values, different areas of highlight, bounce positions and things like that. And all of that gave me more of a plan that I could take into the painting. And you'll see if you watch on the stream videos for this, which again I'll link in the top right here, that I use these references all the time when I'm painting. So I'm translating the digital paint over to what I'm doing with paint with the miniature. Now, I'm sure if you have a perfect capacity to visualize, you maybe don't need this step, but for me, it is something that I think is so useful for most painters and is something that you may wish to try out, whether you're using your phone, an iPad, or just a bit of Photoshop or something on the PC. And so with those references in hand, I began to work on the sword blade. Now, one of the things that Magnus had called me out on in a few feedback sessions in the past was that sometimes when I work on NMM, certainly in blades, I wasn't putting enough interest in the blade, not enough bounces, enough reflections, etc. to really draw the eye in. And so, because I had that in hand, I knew it was something that I wanted to tackle as I began to work on this display piece. And that's something I think I would repeat for everyone. Get feedback. And don't just get feedback on individual models, think about feedback all the time when you take on new projects, because I really do think that's one of the things that helps you improve. Now, with the blade here, you'll see that the color selection isn't too different from what we used on the iron for the armor, but I wanted slightly cleaner colors for two reasons. One being that in my head, I visioned the Krieg having rusty armor and pristine weapons. The things that protect them aren't looked after, whereas the things that they use to kill are suddenly these well-maintained tools. And so I wanted to not have any rust, I wanted a real clean, well-maintained sense of how the weapon operates. And so that's why I shifted the color selection slightly to have essentially greys that are more neutral. That's why you see graphite and the white grey included here. We have the French blue for reflection of the coat and the splitter muster base for any ground reflections, bounces, things like that. I also switched the lead grey for an anthracite, if I can get that word out, grey, which does look and feel a little bit different. And you can see on screen the progress of just working in those highlights bit by bit, taking the time to ensure that there is enough interest on the blade. There are a number of ways to do this. My personal favorite method here is I'm just using essentially a series of fat glazes to build up the highlights and get the look that I'm essentially aiming for. The key thing I would say for all these focal points is take your time. They are in many ways the most important things on the Mini, and therefore you really want them to get to the point where you're happy with how they look and how they reflect your vision for how your display painted Mini should look. And on that note, we move to probably the area that I struggled the most with on the Mini, which is the sword hilt, the golden sword hilt for the sword. Now, I knew going into the project that this would be hard. It's why I did the digital paint over step, but I was kind of dreading it. The volume, if you really blur it down, is not necessarily the hardest, but it has these inlays, these bits that I knew would catch me out, and I still feel that NMM is something that I am working to improve on. It's nothing that I think I have any sense of mastery. And so it was about keeping to the recipe I knew, the one that I was happy with, and following the guide, the roadmap that I'd laid down with the digital paint over. I also made some adjustments as I painted the Mini, and it didn't ever really feel comfortable. I know NMM it's a point of worry for a lot of painters if they've never tried it before. There's a sense of, oh, it's really hard, and it is tricky, but you can reframe your mind around it. Maybe one of them more, as Magnus has said to me, it's like a puzzle, and you're not there just painting it and getting it right first time. You're working out the puzzle and you're finding joy in that process. And when it comes together, when you get it to an output that you're happy with, it is one of the best feelings in painting, I think. I use the Dark Souls analogy. Yeah, fighting Dark Souls bosses is tough, but when you beat them, you feel great. It's the same with NMM. It's worth that struggle to get to an end result that you're happy with. I'm going to take a short interlude here just to laugh at myself. I was going to show painting the face here, but you can see this is the quality of footage that I recorded, and that is why I'm not showing it. I am a bad person. But I don't think there's anything necessarily that I would show from a face painting perspective, because it's a mask that is different from anything else in the video series to date. So just know I did record it. I didn't do a good job at all. When you next see me, you can laugh at me. That's fine. The base was super fun to paint. You will see by the list of paints that it is quite a lot, mainly because there were quite a lot of elements to paint on the base. You had the soil, the wood, the metals from the few things placed on it, and enamels to finish it all off. Now, one of the things that I'd say on painting a base that was advice that I got from someone else in the hobby is understand that your base should take a long time. You can't rush a base, because if you do, it will be the part of your miniature that stands out the most. It is well worth taking your time to put the effort in to get that result that you want. And this is probably my most repeated thing in the VO for this series as it pertains to display painting, is take your time. You can rush it if you want, but the outcome won't be something that you're happy with. So why don't you just take that time, factor it in, get it to a point that you're happy with it. Now, I have a confession here, in that in this part of the project, I knew for me that this Krieg was not just going to be something I was going to paint as a display piece. I wanted to take it to a competition, and Golden Demon Adepticon was just on the horizon. And so I knew two things. One, that I wanted to take it to that competition, but also that I wanted to do an entire squad of these Krieg for an eventual future Golden Demon. So I was doing the base, but perhaps wasn't considering aspects of composition as much as possible, because I knew I'd be ripping it off eventually to put on a new base with his compatriots. So that did affect my painting slightly. But what it means in the context of this video is I knew then that I'd want to go through a feedback cycle to really push this mini as good as it can be for competition painting. So I went into a crit session with Mags to point out the areas that he thought I should work on, the areas of improvement that he'd noticed. Feedback is absolutely vital. If you want to improve as a painter, you have to do feedback. If you want your competition entries to be as good as they can be, you have to do feedback. It is uncomfortable. It is sometimes challenging, but it is always beneficial. And I think for people who haven't necessarily had a feedback session, that it's almost like, well, what will it be like? I'm unsure of what it'll be like, so I won't do it because the unknown is sometimes scary. And so what we did is we recorded this feedback session in its entirety and popped it on YouTube so you can watch it and you can hear Mags give me feedback in real time. And hopefully that demystifies the process. The link will be in the top of the top right of the video here. Watch that video. I really ask you to watch that video and get a sense of what the feedback process is like with someone who really knows what they're doing from a feedback standpoint. But it gave me so much to work on that was so useful in the context of this project. And at the end of that feedback session, I had essentially a load of notes on the model that I was to work on to get it ready for competition. And actually this is my favorite part of painting, certainly display painting, is I have my list of feedback and I create a fix list. I just go through it, working on things that have been pointed out, and it's so nice because I know I'm headed towards a better outcome, a better result, a better thing that I'm putting in a competition. It is for me the joy of feedback. Having something like this, which is just so valuable, both in terms of your long-term improvement, but improvement of the mini itself. And so after that feedback session, here's where we're at. This was the piece that made its way to Adepticon, where I was more than happy to put it in the cabinets. Now, because I already had a 40k entry, I ended up putting this little Krieg fellow in open, where he took a notable, which I was really happy with actually. Open is not necessarily a category that supports a small single mini like this on a fairly standard base. So the fact that it was there and it still took notable brings me a lot of joy, and it actually, I think, showed to me that it was headed in the right direction for an eventual squad entry. I was also lucky enough to get some in-person feedback from Magnus while I was there, which is always a bit different and a little bit better, I think, than feedback based on photography. And that, you can see, was something that I took forward into the actual second Krieg. So that's really where the project is continuing. I went through the journey of display painting the Krieg guy. I really loved him. I really wanted to do a squad. And you can see here the second mini is completed, and I'm continuing to work on the rest of the full squad. You don't ever know where you'll find your joy in this hobby, and squad painting is definitely one for me. And I hope this video series has ultimately encouraged you to try this stuff out, to really push yourself to get a piece to the highest standard that you can produce. And not only that you do that, but you find joy in that process and what it can mean for you and your work going forward. I think that's all I have to say on week 3. I've really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed the opportunity to talk about my process and my painting and the outputs that I'm quite proud of. And so wherever you are, whatever you do from now, enjoy it, do some good painting, make sure you paint something beautiful, and until next time, have a good day. Bye-bye.